years and the best-selling author of 3 books. Neil Balter also started his company based on specialized knowledge and imagination. He got his specialized knowledge from his job as a carpenter's apprentice. His imagination came into play the day he was hired by a customer who wanted to clear up a messy closet by having shelves installed. Now that kind of job must have been offered to thousands of carpenters, but not one of them had the imagination to see in it what Neil Balter saw. When he finished the work, Balter didn't just see nicely fitted shelves. He saw that he had created a solution for a problem that was common to every household in America. He took the money he earned from the job and started his own business, California Closet Company, which specialized in shelves and fittings designed to attractively organize closet space for maximum efficiency. But Balter's imagination didn't stop once he had his own business up and running. Now he could imagine an even bigger operation. So he went out to find new specialized knowledge about operating and franchising a business. Neil Balter had licensed more than 100 California closet franchises when Williams-Sonoma offered to buy the company for $12 million. Lillian Vernon's specialized knowledge was in an area that many women had, but they didn't have the imagination she had. To quote from her autobiography, An Eye for Winners, handbags. I knew about those, why not sell them, and belts to match? Didn't every teenage girl strolling along the street anywhere in the United States sport a handbag and belt? And my handbags would offer something special. Each one would be personalized with initials. I knew with absolute certainty that teenagers would go for items that made them feel unique. She believed enough in her idea that she spent $495 to take a small ad in 17 magazine. The ad brought in $32,000 in orders. That was when Lillian Vernon started to gather other specialized knowledge about renting space, manufacturing products, warehousing, and shipping, all of which she'd need to grow her idea of bags and belts into a direct response business featuring a whole array of distinctively monogrammed items. Within a few years, she needed more specialized knowledge about product photography, layout, printing, and direct mail, as she imagined having her own catalog. She started by mailing a 16-page black and white catalog to 125,000 customers who had bought products from her in the past. At the beginning of the 21st century, Lillian Vernon was still picking the merchandise and overseeing the design of her catalogs, many of which now run well over 100 full-color pages, are mailed to millions of people many times each year, and generate approximately $250 million in annual sales. There is another story about gathering specialized knowledge that is so good we will use it to conclude this editorial comment. It actually comes from the Napoleon Hill archives, and although he did not include it in Think and Grow Rich, he often used it as an example in his lectures and seminars. There was a young man who started out working for the railroad in 1893 as a machinist at 5 cents an hour. He was always taking courses and learning what he could about steam engines, and by 1905 he had worked his way up through the ranks until he was superintendent of motive power for Chicago Great Western in Olwine, Iowa. Then he did something that must have made his friends think he had taken leave of his senses. He was attending the Chicago Automobile Show when a red and white locomobile caught his attention. He put up his life savings of $700 and convinced a friend to co-sign a loan for $4,300 so he could buy the car. He promptly took it home, put it into a shed, jacked it up, and proceeded to take it apart piece by piece. Then he put it back together again. Then he took it apart and put it back together again. After doing that a few more times, he had learned what he wanted to know. And that was how Walter P. Chrysler gathered the specialized knowledge he needed to get himself out of railroading and into the automobile business. This is the end of the editor's comment. There is no fixed price for sound ideas. Behind all ideas is specialized knowledge. But remember, specialized knowledge is more abundant and more easily acquired than ideas. Because of this truth, there are ever-increasing opportunities for the person capable of helping men and women sell their personal services. Capability means imagination, the one quality needed to combine specialized knowledge with ideas to create organized plans that will yield riches. If you have imagination, this chapter may present you with an idea that is the beginning of the riches you desire. Remember, the idea is the main thing. Specialized knowledge may be found just around the corner. Any corner. Happiness is found in doing, not merely in possessing. Chapter 7. Imagination. The workshop of the mind. The fifth step toward riches. The imagination is literally the workshop where all plans are created. It is where the impulse, the desire, is given shape, form, and action through the aid of the imaginative faculty of the mind. It has been said that we can create anything that we can imagine. Through the aid of imagination, we have discovered and harnessed more of nature's forces during the past 50 years than during the entire history of the human race previous to that time. And even with all we have accomplished, we have come nowhere near the limit of what we are capable. Our only limitation, within reason, lies in the development and use of our imagination. The human imagination offers so much possibility, it is as though we have merely discovered that we have an imagination and have just started to use it in a very elementary way. Two forms of imagination. The imaginative faculty functions in two forms. One is known as synthetic imagination, and the other as creative imagination. Editor's comments. In modern usage, the word synthetic has taken on a negative connotation, implying that something is artificial, not the real thing. Today, the word synthesized, which is defined as something made up from component parts, would better describe what Hill had in mind and has been substituted here accordingly. This is the end of the editor's comment. Synthesized imagination. Through this faculty, you arrange old concepts, ideas, or plans into new combinations. Synthesized imagination does not create anything. It merely works with the material of experience, education, and observation with which it is fed. It is the faculty used by most inventors, with the exception of those geniuses who draw upon the creative imagination when they cannot solve problems through synthesized imagination. Creative imagination. Through the faculty of creative imagination, the finite human mind has direct communication with infinite intelligence, the faculty through which hunches and inspirations are received. It is by this faculty that all basic or new ideas are handed over to mankind. It is through this faculty that we pick up vibes from other people, and in that way one individual may tune in or communicate with the subconscious minds of others. This concept is explained in greater detail later. The creative imagination works automatically, but only when your conscious mind is motivated, energized, and working at such a high rate that it becomes very perceptive and receptive, such as when the conscious mind is stimulated through the emotion of a strong desire. The great leaders of business, industry, and finance, and the great artists, musicians, poets, and writers became great because they developed the faculty of creative imagination. Editor's comment. At this point, it should be noted that both kinds of imagination are equally valuable to you, and they work together so seamlessly, it is often hard to tell where one ends and the other begins. For instance, when Jeff Bezos created the idea of Amazon.com, was it synthesized imagination or creative imagination? At the time, many people were getting onto the idea of the internet as a sales medium. From this, it could be concluded that he was drawing upon experience, education, and observation, which would mean he was using synthesized imagination. But why did he decide to sell books? Was that synthesized or creative? Did that idea come out of something in his subconscious that just felt like books were the right thing? And what about that name? Calling a bookstore Amazon didn't make sense to anyone but Bezos, but it certainly caught the public's attention. How important was the name in the store's success? Was that choice creative or synthesized? Now take it a step further. What about eBay? Amazon had already shown that you could sell a lot of goods on the internet. When Pierre Omidyar hit on the idea of selling things on the internet by turning it into an auction house, what part was synthesized and what part was creative? The answer is, it doesn't matter. Whether you are consciously assembling the parts of a plan, or if subconsciously the pieces fall into place and suddenly hit you in a flash of inspiration, all that matters is that you are putting your imagination to work. And the more you use it, the better both the synthesized and the creative will work for you. This is the end of the editor's comment. Desire is a thought, an impulse. It is nebulous and ephemeral. It is abstract and of no value until it has been transformed into its physical counterpart. While the synthesized imagination is the one that will be used most frequently in the process of transforming desire into money, there will be circumstances and situations that demand the use of the creative imagination as well. Both the synthesized and the creative imagination become more alert and receptive with use. And though your imaginative faculty may have become weak through lack of use, you can revive it. Just as any muscle or organ of the body develops the more it is used, your imagination also becomes more receptive in direct response to the amount that you use it. Use your synthesized imagination. First, let us focus attention on the development of the synthesized imagination. This is the faculty that you will use more often in converting desire into money. Transformation of the intangible impulse of desire into the tangible reality of money calls for the use of a plan or plans. To make plans, you must use your imagination. Mainly, this will require you to use your synthesized imagination as you draw upon your experience, your education, and your observations. Editor's comment. The following is adapted from Hill's later writing and appears in Napoleon Hill's Keys to Success. An excellent example of synthesized imagination is Edison's invention of the light bulb. He began with one recognized fact that other people had discovered. A wire could be heated by electricity until it produced light. The problem was that the intense heat quickly burned the wire out, and the light never lasted more than a few minutes. Edison failed more than 10,000 times in his attempt to control this heat. When he found the method, it was by applying another common fact that had simply eluded everyone else. He realized that charcoal is produced by setting wood on fire, covering it with soil, and allowing the fires to smolder. The soil permits only enough air to reach the fire to keep it burning without blazing, and that way the wood isn't burned up. When Edison recognized this fact, his imagination immediately associated it with the idea of heating the wire. He placed the wire inside a bottle, pumped out most of the air, and produced the first incandescent light. It burned for 8.5 hours. Everything that Edison used to make the electric light was widely known, but the way he synthesized the knowledge changed the world and made him a very wealthy man. W. Clement Stone called the process the R2A2 formula: recognize and relate, assimilate and apply. If you do that with everything you see, hear, think, and experience, it will give you a new way of looking at familiar things. If you do that, you can achieve what others believe is impossible. Later in this chapter, you will read of other fortunes that grew from even simpler synthesized ideas, and these stories should lead you to conclude that the combination of ideas is nothing that you couldn't have thought of yourself. That alone should start your own imagination synthesizing ideas. However, even though these stories will inspire you, and you will be anxious to get started, this is not yet the point for you to start making plans. Here, and throughout Think and Grow Rich, Napoleon Hill reminds the reader that this book is meant to be read all the way through before beginning to put the philosophy into practice. There are other ideas to be assimilated from later chapters that will influence your imagination and therefore affect the plans you may develop. This is the end of the editor's comments. Read the entire book through, then come back to this chapter and begin to put your imagination to work on the building of a plan for transforming your desire into money. Examples and instructions for creating plans are given in almost every chapter. Carry out the instructions that are best suited to your needs and put your plan in writing. The moment you complete this, you will have definitely given concrete form to your intangible desire. Now, read that sentence once more in a slightly different way. The moment I put my plan in writing, I will have definitely given concrete form to my desire. Now read it aloud and realize what you are telling yourself. Desire is only a thought. Through synthesized imagination, your experience, education, and observations will give it shape, form, and action. From the moment you follow those instructions and write out your desire and your plan, you will have actually taken the first of a series of steps that will enable you to convert the thought into its physical counterpart. Editor's comments. Synthesized imagination plays a role in every phase of a business plan. In fact, some of the most successful companies actually get started from synthesized imagination. When an entrepreneur, drawing upon his or her education, experience, and observations, takes an idea from one source and gives it a new application. That is exactly what happened with Ruth Handler. She and her husband, along with another partner, had started a small manufacturing company which had evolved into toy manufacturing. The success of their business depended on coming up with new toy ideas. Watching her young daughter at play, Ruth Handler noticed that she was fascinated with cutout books that featured teenage girl or career women paper dolls that she could cut out clothes for. She also knew that little girls love to play dress-up in grown-up clothes. These ideas, drawn from Ruth Handler's education, experience, and observations, synthesized themselves in her imagination and came together as a new idea. Ruth Handler announced that they should make a lifelike teenage girl doll. Not a paper doll, but a real three-dimensional grown-up doll with a woman's figure, and they could also make grown-up clothes to fit it, so that girls could play dress-up with the doll. In honor of the source of inspiration, Ruth Handler named the new doll after her daughter, Barbie. As obvious as it seems now, until Ruth Handler, no one had the imagination to make and market a doll that looked like a woman. And certainly no one had ever made endless collections of tiny women's fashions for a doll to wear. Previously, we mentioned Jeff Bezos creating Amazon by combining the idea of a bookstore with the internet, and Pierre Omidyar doing the same thing with auctions when he launched eBay. Mary Kay Ash took the idea of women running their own businesses and added the idea of door-to-door sales. Anita Roddick took the trend of all-natural ingredients, combined it with cosmetics, and created the body shop empire. Bernard Marcus and Arthur Blank took the concept of the supermarket, combined it with hardware, and created Home Depot. Thomas Stemberg and Leo Kahn did the same thing with office supplies and launched Staples. Once the connections are made, it may seem obvious, but making these supposedly obvious connections has brought success to many people. Napoleon Hill says imagination is like a muscle that can be strengthened through use. Just as there are specific exercises that will build and improve physical muscles, specific exercises have been developed to improve and build imagination. And it is commonly accepted that creativity developed in one area will affect your creativity in others. Dr. Edward de Bono, one of the most highly regarded experts in the field, has written more than 25 books, including the bestsellers Lateral Thinking and 6 Thinking Hats, that are literally designed to make you think. Dr. Betty Edwards' bestseller, Drawing on the Right Side of the Brain, uses drawing techniques to awaken creativity. Dr. Gabrielle Rico's bestseller, Writing the Natural Way, uses a technique called clustering as a way to break writer's block. And Tony Buzan uses a similar method for opening your mind that he terms mind mapping. In their bestseller, Super Learning, Sheila Ostrander and Lynn Schroeder show ways to use classical music, and Roger Von Eck suggests puzzles and riddles as stimuli in a whack on the side of the head. This is the end of the editor's comments. Tapping into creative imagination. The earth on which you live, you yourself, and every other material thing are the result of evolutionary change, through which bits of matter have been organized and arranged in an orderly fashion. As far as science has been able to determine, the entire universe consists of but two things, matter and energy. Moreover, and this statement is of stupendous importance, this earth, every one of the billions of individual cells of your body, and every subatomic particle of matter began as an intangible form of energy. Through the combination of energy and matter has been created everything perceptible, from the largest star in the heavens down to and including man himself. Desire is a thought impulse. Thought impulses are forms of energy. When you begin the process of acquiring money by using the thought impulse of desire, you are drafting into your service the same stuff that nature used in creating this earth, as well as every material form in the universe, including your body and your brain, in which the thought impulses function. Editor's comments. Although recent developments in physics, gauge theory, string theory, membrane theory, and others have advanced our understanding of matter and energy, Hill's preceding description remains in accord with modern science. The newer theories are variations on and refinements of the basic concept that everything in the universe is either space, time, matter, or energy. And as Einstein stated, energy and matter are in fact different forms of the same thing. As Hill says, everything from the stars to the solar system to the earth, to you, your brain, and that little spark called a thought, are all the same stuff. As when a tablecloth is spread out, there are folds and bumps in the fabric that are all different from each other, but they are all still tablecloth. Like the folds and bumps in the tablecloth, energy and matter are the same thing in different forms. Therefore you, matter, your thoughts, energy, and everybody else, matter, and their thoughts, energy, and all other things, matter, are not just interconnected, but are in essence all the same thing. Hill calls this interrelation of everything to everything else infinite intelligence. In the chapter on faith, he made his first mention of infinite intelligence being the source of hunches, intuition, and flashes of inspiration. In the chapter on autosuggestion, he proposed that the subconscious mind is the connection with infinite intelligence. In this chapter, Hill elaborates that creative imagination is the receiver through which these flashes of insight come to us from infinite intelligence. Under some circumstances, when your mind is operating at a high rate, your creative intelligence receives not just an idea, but also a flash of intuition. You get a hunch or a premonition about something or somebody. That flash could not come from your conscious or your subconscious because neither ever had the information. Because everything is a part of everything else, your creative imagination, energy, pulled the thought, energy, directly from the common pool of infinite intelligence, energy, that contains not just your subconscious, energy, but all other subconscious minds, energy, as well. Infinite intelligence is a complex concept, and for those readers who find themselves questioning the process, be assured that Hill expands on the theory in later chapters. The editors advise the reader to set aside any questions for the moment and focus on the logical and practical application Hill had in mind. This is the end of the editor's comments. You are engaged in trying to turn your desire into its physical or monetary counterpart, and there are laws of physics and principles of psychology that can help you. But first, you must give yourself time to become familiar with these laws and learn to use them. Through repetition, and by describing these principles from every conceivable angle, I hope to reveal to you the secret through which every great fortune has been accumulated. Strange and paradoxical as it may seem, the secret is not a secret. It is made obvious in the earth, the stars, the planets, in the elements above and around us, in every blade of grass, and every form of life within our vision. Do not be discouraged if you do not fully understand or accept this theory. I do not expect that you will accept all that is in this chapter on your first reading. Assimilate as much as you can now as you read this for the first time. Later, when you reread and study it, you will discover that something has happened to clarify it and give you a broader understanding of the whole. Above all, do not stop nor hesitate in your study of these principles until you have read the book at least 3 times. Then you will not want to stop. How to make practical use of imagination. Ideas are the beginning points of all fortunes. Ideas are products of the imagination. Following are 2 true stories about ideas that have yielded huge fortunes. I hope that these stories will convey how important a role imagination can play in turning an idea into success, and that they will illustrate the method by which imagination may be used in accumulating riches. The Enchanted Kettle. In the late 1880s, an old country doctor drove to town, hitched his horse, quietly slipped into a drugstore by the back door, and began dickering with a young drug clerk. For more than an hour behind the prescription counter, the old doctor and the clerk talked in low tones. Then the doctor left. He went out to the buggy and brought back a large old-fashioned kettle, a big wooden paddle, used for stirring the contents of the kettle, and deposited them in the back of the store. The clerk inspected the kettle, reached into his inside pocket, took out a roll of bills, and handed it over to the doctor. The roll contained exactly $500, the clerk's entire savings. The doctor handed over a small slip of paper on which was written a secret formula. The words on that small slip of paper were worth a king's ransom, but not to the doctor. Those magic words were needed to start the kettle to boiling, but neither the doctor nor the young clerk knew what fabulous fortunes were destined to flow from that kettle. The old doctor was glad to sell the outfit for $500. The clerk was taking a big chance by staking his entire life savings on a mere scrap of paper and an old kettle. He never dreamed his investment would start a kettle to overflowing with gold that would one day surpass the miraculous performance of Aladdin's lamp. What the clerk really purchased was an idea. The old kettle and the wooden paddle and the secret message on a slip of paper were incidental. The miracle of that kettle only began to take place after the new owner mixed with the secret instructions an ingredient of which the doctor knew nothing. See if you can discover what it was that the young man added to the secret message, which caused the kettle to overflow with gold. Here you have a story of facts stranger than fiction, facts that began in the form of an idea. Just look at the vast fortunes of gold this idea has produced. It has paid, and still pays, huge fortunes to men and women all over the world who distribute the contents of the kettle to millions of people. The old kettle is now one of the world's largest consumers of sugar, thus providing jobs to thousands of men and women engaged in growing sugarcane and in refining and marketing sugar. The old kettle consumes annually millions of bottles and cans, providing jobs to huge numbers of workers. The old kettle gives employment to an army of clerks, stenographers, copywriters, and advertising experts throughout the nation. It has brought fame and fortune to scores of artists who have created magnificent pictures describing the product. The old kettle has converted Atlanta, which was a small southern city, into the business capital of the South, where it now benefits, directly or indirectly, every business and practically every resident of the city. The influence of this idea now benefits every civilized country in the world, pouring out a continuous stream of gold to all who touch it. Gold from the kettle built and maintains one of the most prominent colleges of the South, where thousands of young people receive the training essential for success. If the product of that old brass kettle could talk, it would tell thrilling tales in every language, tales of love, of business, of professional men and women who are daily being stimulated by it. I am sure of at least one such tale of romance, for I was a part of it, and it all began not far from the very spot on which the drug clerk purchased the old kettle. It was there that I met my wife, And it was she who first told me of the enchanted kettle. It was the product of that kettle we were drinking when I asked her to accept me for better or worse. Whoever you are, wherever you may live, whatever your occupation, just remember every time you see the words Coca-Cola that its vast empire of wealth and influence grew out of a single idea. And that idea, the mysterious ingredient the drug clerk Asa Candler mixed with a secret formula, was imagination. Stop and think of that for a moment. Keep in mind that the steps to riches described in this book are the very same principles through which the influence of Coca-Cola has been extended to every city, town, village, and crossroads of the world. Now here's the most important thing to remember. The ideas you create may have the possibility of duplicating the enormous success of this worldwide thirst killer. Editor's comments. Harlan Sanders, too, had a recipe in a magic kettle. Actually, his kettle was a pressure cooker, but neither his cooker nor his recipe of 11 herbs and spices would be mentioned here if he didn't also have imagination. Harlan Sanders owned and operated a successful motel and cafe in Corbin, Kentucky. Then, when the new interstate highway came through, it bypassed Sanders' location. In a short time, his business went broke, leaving him with little more than his recipe for fried chicken and a way to make it quickly in a pressure cooker. At 62 years of age, the Colonel, as people called him, had to find a new way to make a living. That's when the magic ingredient, imagination, came in. He decided he wasn't going to sell fried chicken anymore. Instead, he would sell his method for making it. He packed his recipe and cooker into the back of his car and hit the road to demonstrate his fried chicken to other restaurant owners. In the first 2 years, he managed to sell 5 franchises. 2 years later, he'd sold 200. 4 years later, he was up to 600 locations when he was approached by an investment group to sell his company. Recognizing that the magic wasn't just in the kettle or the recipe, the new owners asked Colonel Sanders to stay on as spokesman for the company, which he did until his death in 1980. Today, there are almost 12,000 KFC locations in more than 80 countries with sales of nearly $10 billion a year. Debbie Fields was a 20-year-old housewife who loved to bake cookies. She had no formal education and no business experience, but she had a recipe and an imaginative